Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Today we are going to take a quick look at the really rather lovely Winter Tales. Now, I'm taking a look at this because recently I opened an Instagram account. I've never had an Instagram account before, but I decided to open one. I thought it would be a good way to do some sort of behind the scenes images and things like that, sort of to give a glimpse behind the curtain, but also to sort of just share some of my favourite board game art as and when I'm playing the games and they're laid out on the table. And as Instagram is obviously a very visual social media platform, it got me thinking about games that I really like the aesthetic of. And Winter Tales is one such game. It's one of the most beautiful games in my collection, and I'm very pleased to have a copy. I have already reviewed this game on my blog, alwaysboredneverboring.com. I gave it a very positive review, and not very many people did. This is the version I've got here is the first edition. Fancy Flight Games picked it up, and they did an edition as well, where they it's in a different size box, and it has a few name changes and a slightly cleaner rule set, because the original rule set isn't great. But yeah, it didn't do very well, to the best of my knowledge, and most of the reviews are lukewarm at best, if not pretty much slating the game. But I think it's really rather beautiful game. It's not a game I've played very much, but it is. Not only does it look beautiful, I think it's a beautiful concept because it's a storytelling game, and I'll talk very briefly about what that means in a moment. But the main reason I'm doing this video is because I just wanted to share some of the really cool artwork. So anyway, like I say, this is the first edition of the game. So I actually have a printout inside of the second edition Fancy Flight Games edition in there, because the original rules are a bit rubbish. And then there's some other bits and bobs. But really, the game is a board, a couple of tokens, a moving pawns, and some cards. The board is really a work of art. I'm not going to be able to get it all in shot, but basically what this game is it's set in the world of fairy tales, and there has been a war called the Conflict of Autumn, in which all the good fairy tale characters fought the evil fairy tale characters, and unfortunately the good characters lost, and this brought the onset of winter. But some of the good characters survived the war, and they went underground and started to fight a guerrilla war. So the background for this game is that the soldiers of winter rule the fairy tale land, and then you've got the good fairy tale characters that are working behind the scenes to try and bring down the regime. And so you've got this sort of dystopian dark fantasy world with a glimmer of hope below the surface as the rebels of spring attempt to put things right. And it's played out over this board, and I don't know how much of this is going to sort of come out on camera, but you have sort of main locations which sort of have a slightly sort of zoomed in image of them, and then in the rest of the town, all kind of wrecked and dark. You can see there's been some destruction here, and you've got sort of some really cool locations. We've got Dorothy's mansion from The Wizard of Oz. We've got the Memory Lane Cemetery, the Fair of Wonders, the Puppet Theatre. Pinocchio is a character in this game. Winter's Prison, the Nightmare Factory, where the White Rabbit performs horrible experiments. The Mad Hatter Asylum, because the Mad Hatter now runs the Lunatic Asylum, and Oaks Park over here. And it's a lovely board. It's like I say, I can't sort of get it all in one go, but you can see even the iconography and things. It's got a very distinct aesthetic, which I absolutely love. And that, I mean, the aesthetic of it, the artwork and that theme is a big selling point of the game for me. As someone who likes to think of himself as a storyteller, this game sort of automatically appealed to that part of me anyway. But yeah, so you've got rebels and winter soldiers, and these are the character cards for them. So they're super shiny, so they're gonna glare like crazy on my lighting here. But we've got the cat and the fox from Pinocchio, and there's sort of a horrible twist on some of these characters. I mean, like, these guys are physically stitched together. Each character's got a little icon which represents a sort of special ability, so that's what that icon is down there. But the artwork is lovely, and the reverse of the card shows a shattered version of the same image, which is quite nice and a little bit disturbing. I mean, that's mainly just to sort of reflect that they've activated for the turn. But yeah, so these are the bad guys. So you've got the cat and the fox. They are basically arms dealers in this dystopian world. We've got the white rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. He is he's a big businessman. He's a fat cat, a fat wabbit. We have the wolf, who is the veteran soldier. He actually survived his encounter with the woodsman. As you can see, he has been stitched back up. His stomach is all stitched. And he's not best pleased about that. And he leads the armies. We have the Mad Hatter, as I've already mentioned. He is in charge of the asylum, where he has a very famous resident, which we will get to in a moment. It's just the character artwork in this is absolutely wonderful. A huge fan of this artwork. Mangia Fuko, which I've probably horribly mangled that pronunciation, because I always do. He is in a wheelchair, having suffered some serious injuries during the war, and he's very bitter and twisted as a result, but he is basically in charge of the town now. He rules with an iron fist. And sadly, Snow White eventually followed in her stepmother's footsteps, and she has become an evil queen of winter. So she's there. She's got a looking glass in her hand, and we have Candlewick from Pinocchio, formerly a donkey, not looking particularly happy. But then, he used to be a donkey. So those are the evil characters, and then we have the spring rebels, who are in a bad way, most of them. We have the little match girl, actually a spirit raised from the dead in order to seek vengeance on the winter that took her family and her life. It's a really very beautiful image. Very sad, and great inspiration for storytelling. We have the Scarecrow, one of several characters from Wizard of Oz in the game. It's really cool. So it's very very Tim Burton-esque. A lot of the artwork, which is a part of why I like it. We have Alice, who is, as you can see, in a straight jacket and has a smile and a middle distance gaze, which says quite a lot about where she's at the moment. But yeah, she has been a resident of the asylum. We have Grumpy. I believe he was renamed for the Fancy Flights version to Cranky. But yeah, he's the only remaining dwarf. Now a bitter enemy of Snow White. We have Pinocchio, looking very much the resistance fighter there. He's got a pistol and a determined look. Then we have the Tin Man. The poor Tin Man. Here's his heart. The Tin Man was very sad because his friend the Lion was murdered during the war, and obviously his other friends scattered. Then we have Dorothy, now old, drinking a cup of tea, but with a very knowing look. So she's lived through a lot, she's seen a lot, and she's got plans. So those are the characters. So and that's one of the things I really love about this game. The other thing I really love is it has, like I said, it's a storytelling game, and it has a very unique approach to how the game works. In that, on your turn, you activate a character. You have pawns to move the characters around the board. When you activate a character, you activate them by telling stories, and you do that with there's a deck of cards. Not nearly enough cards, I have to say, not nearly enough. But the cards have these really lovely, childish doodles. And the great thing about these doodles is that they can mean lots of different things. I mean, you when you look at them, they could mean anything. I mean, this sort of immediately looks to me like a person sleeping, but it could also be a person on a hospital gurney. It could be somebody in a coffin. It could be just something representing sleep. It could be, this could be a hat here, like a baseball cap. You look at the pictures and they can mean different things to different people, or they can mean different things in certain situations. Is this a mask? Is this a face? Is this a pumpkin? Is it a jack-o'-lantern? Is it an apple? Is it an angry orange? So you get a hand of these cards, and when you want to activate a character, you have to create a story for what they do. If you want to move through the streets of the town, you don't just move the playing piece. You have to use cards, and you have to explain what's going on. For example, if you want to go down the street, you could play this card and say, while everybody was sleeping, Pinocchio crept out into the streets and made his way down to the asylum to begin the next stage in his efforts to save Alice. I don't know, but there you go. So it's that sort of thing. You use a card as a jumping off point to create a story, and then your opponent can sort of play cards to introduce themselves into the story. And there are rules in place that you're not allowed to be destructive. You're not allowed to. You add to a story. You don't take away from a story, and that is something that I think is one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't like this game, is because you have to be in a quite a specific mindset, and you can't be sort of too competitive. It is a competitive game, but you should be competing to tell the best story, not competing to destroy your opponent's story. For example, if the good player is sort of created this whole storyline, and then the other player goes, and then they woke up and it was all a dream, that's destructive, because what you've done is, rather than creating a story or creating an interesting way to turn events from the other player's story into events in your story, you've just negated everything they've done. You've just said, no, it's just a dream, it didn't happen. So you can't do that. It's like if you've got one player goes, they're trying to pick a lock, and then the other person turns around and says, but actually it turns out that they were locked up in the asylum all along and they've imagined everything. Again, you're just taking away all that story. You're just being destructive, and it's something that's quite difficult to sort of to begin with, to sort of get your head around. That you're adding to a story and you're manipulating events within a story to veer the story in the direction you want it to go, because over the course of the game, people are swinging the story one way or the other, and if there's an odd number of players, you have one player who's a narrator who is trying to keep things in the middle, and he or she, I should say, he. I'm saying he because I'm normally the narrator, but the narrator will be trying to veer the story one way or the other, to try and sort of balance out all the events and maintain the status quo. And that's a really interesting concept, but if you play it too aggressively, it becomes no fun, because you can just play really aggressively and keep underscoring and undermining what other people have done. But if you play it really well and creatively, and you use things that other players have done to sort of serve as a launch pad for your own ideas, then you can have amazing fun with it. And there are special rules in play for like a fight. Like you may have the wolf decides to fight the Tin Man, and when you do that, I should point out these cards are double-sided. They're the same image on each side, but they're different colours. So, there's some things that aren't in there. But yeah, so you can have, for example, you've like I say, you've got the wolf fighting the Tin Man. So say the Tin Man, the wolf is. I've just dropped that. Say the wolf has played a card to instigate a battle. He says the wolf with his misguided notion of justice decides to tackle the Tin Man. The Tin Man, he's only just woken up from being switched off for decades. So he decides that the only course at this moment is to escape. So he heads for the only door out of the building. So at this stage, the wolf player has played a card, and then the Tin Man's played a card, and that's balanced out the battle. You've got a limited number of cards in your hand, obviously. So then the wolf player might look through and say, the wolf was prepared for such sneaky tricks, and he had secreted the key to the only door out of the building under his hat. And then you can say, luckily, the Tin Man found a bottle on a nearby table, and he used it to knock the hat off of the wolf's head and take the key from inside. And then the wolf player might say, okay, well, I'm not actually going to play any more cards because I want to save those cards for something else. And in this case, the Tin Man has won because he kind of played the last bit of the story, and then the winner of the fight gets to complete that section of the story. So in this case, the Tin Man player would say he retrieves the key, he unlocks the door and escapes out into the night, leaving the wolf gnashing his teeth in frustration. Hooray! That sort of thing. So that's basically how the game works. There's this sort of really nice to and fro, but I just think it's a really beautiful mechanism, having these cards with these childish illustrations that mean lots of different things to different people, and depending on which way up you do it, the cards don't have a particular orientation, so depending on which way you look at it, they mean something different again. And yeah, I mean, some of them are it's quite obvious. I mean, this is sort of a village, but it's also, you can use it as a village or a town or a city, as a tower, as a barn outside a village, as a path, a destination. You can use it as a concept, like home, memories of home. There's loads of different ways that you can use each card. You don't have to use it as a physical thing. You don't have. I mean, this is a house with a garden with a tree, but it's also possibly a hand reaching up from a grave, or it's also the concept of home. It's safety, security. You can use it to mean any of these things, and you can use it. It's a very loose style of play in which you're just using images to inspire you, and that's what images do, isn't it? They inspire us, and I think it's a lovely game. You can read my review on Always Bored Never Boring, where I go into this in a lot more detail. But I just wanted to show off some of the cards really in this video, and just talk about a game that, for me, oh look, it's Little Mermaid. A game that for me is one of the most beautiful games in my collection, partly because the artwork is beautiful, and partly because I just think the concept is beautiful. I think anything that's about storytelling, anything which inspires, anything which leads to creation, anything which makes people think outside the box, anything that makes people compete in a way that isn't about breaking down and destroying the other person, but building on something. So even though you're competing, you're building towards something amazing, and there is potential in this game to create things that are amazing. You can create some really beautiful stories, and I have seen some lovely stories develop from this game, and I recommend it, but it is an acquired taste. What do you guys think? I mean, you know, I've seen people look at these cards and say they're just childish scribbles and they're rubbish. I look at them and see something very beautiful, something that something inspirational. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. But that's it from me for now. Thanks for watching. If you've made it through 21 minutes of me gabbling about this game, I really appreciate you stopping by. Thanks very much, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye bye.